Good evening, welcome and Happy New Year to you all to the Executive Scrutiny Board meeting Tuesday the 10th of January. Do you have any apologies?
Yeah, Mike Carr sends his apologies.
Thank you very much for that. I have no late items for the meeting. Any declarations of interest, please? If there aren't any, we'll move on to item 4, minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of December. They're attached. Can I take those as a true and accurate recording of that meeting?
Chair, Councillor Kerr has contacted me earlier today with 2 minor corrections.
Okay. Lucy?
I would tell you precisely what they are, but I've mislaid the piece of paper I wrote them on.
Chair, I'll have a look. Have a look here. So it's regarding the combined authority item. Regarding principle 1 in the last line, it should be connection, not affection. So that's a correction of a word there. And on principle 6, it isn't up to government, but up a bit in practice from council to combined authority. I think that's captured all case, isn't it? So I'll put those amendments under the minutes.
Okay, with those amendments, are you happy to accept the minutes as a true and accurate reflection of the meeting? Yeah, okay, thank you very much for that. Forward plan, item 5. Item 8, council tax base. Simon, are you going to take us through that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I think your microphone was off for a moment there because we weren't hearing you out here. So, okay. So this is a standard report that we produce of the number of properties in the city as of the 1st of December. You'll be aware that properties are in Band A to H with very few exemptions. And we take the number of properties, we look at then factors like single person discount, local council tax support, and come up with what is called a Band D equivalent. This is a national comparator. That then creates a number, which is the number of properties that are eligible for council tax for the purpose of a calculation. For 2023-24, that's 71,038.69 compared to 70,030.60 in the previous year. So approximately 1,008 new properties, which will then generate an additional council tax to the council, and that is detailed in the medium-term financial plan, which is out for consultation, the budget report at the moment. The report also asks you to consider the collection rate for 23-24. That's collection rate over a number of years. And we have put in a collection rate of 97.2%, which represents a realistic assessment of the amount of council tax. We were hoping to increase that, but the impact of the post-COVID lag or whatever means that we think that is realistic. And finally, members, the report does talk about the council tax charges on empty properties that you agreed last year, which is around trying to bring empty properties back into use. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Simon. Any comments, observations? Lucy?
Thank you, Chair. I was wanting to talk about the empty property premium, and as well as the reasons given in 4.7.2. I think the other one which matters to me is that it means that it's not just antisocial behaviour and housing shortage. It's also the quality of an area. It's not, which may not be associated with antisocial behaviour, but it's just the quality. And we talk in 4.7.3 of properties that are actually standing empty and requiring structural major repairs, which is again referred to in 4.7.4. But at the moment, if the property is requiring structural and major repairs, it's not charged at as high a rate than if it's standing ready to be occupied. And I feel that that is a disincentive for people actually to bring a property back into use. And I just wonder whether there's an opportunity to review that. In 4.7.4, it talks about if it's been empty and unoccupied for a period of time, we'll charge extra. But that doesn't include, apparently, when it is requiring structural major repairs, unless that is something which isn't explicitly explained here. If it changes hand and it requires major work doing on it, then yes, I think it's absolutely right to give a bit of extra time to bring it back into use.
Yeah.
But it's that question about when it's standing empty under the same ownership, needing repairs, do we only charge at 100% or should we be reviewing that?
Simon, can you help us with that, please?
Yes, I think we discussed this last year where there was a disincentive for people to take on new ownership for a property that had been vacant for 5 years. So someone was deliberately trying to improve an area and a previous landlord had kept it empty for whatever reason, then suddenly having to pay a premium would dissuade people coming in as a new owner to bring it back into use. So that paragraph of 4.7.4 was added last year as a sort of codicil, if you want to call it, to our standard premium. We are very keen to bring properties back into use, which is why you have that tapering amount. And I think Ian's here from Head of Services for Housing. And obviously, we have high levels of success in bringing empty homes back into use of both quality and stock. So I don't know, Chair, if you want Ian to add anything to that.
Have you got anything to add to that, Ian, at all?
Not really. I think Simon's explained it well. Typically, we will directly intervene in about 70 cases a year in terms of bringing empty homes back into use. But the team then does other things in terms of improving the accuracy of our council tax data and making sure that all the homes that have been brought back into the city are recorded as such and aren't recorded as empty, which would then count against us in terms of things like new homes developments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. Lucy, come up quickly.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm still uncertain why in that fifth bullet point of 4.7.3, a property that is requiring major repair is only charged at 100%, even if it's been unoccupied for 10 years or more. When if it had been still in a reasonable state of reasonable condition, we'd be charging it an extra 300%. But it's beginning to fall down now, so suddenly it goes from 300% additional charge to a standard charge, which doesn't seem right to me, and I think it ought to be reviewed.
Yeah, I thought the officer explained that, but maybe
but
maybe if they can explain it a little more clearly. Simon, could you help us?
Thank you. I think we've got to remember this is primarily for a purpose of arriving at the calculation. Behind that, there'll be a whole lot of details within the council tax section of what this means and the eligibility discounts and everything else. I'll commit to getting John Massey, our Head of Revenues and Benefits, to contact Councillor Kerr to talk about or to explain it further, because this report is not asking you to adopt a policy. This report is about the calculation, so I don't have that readily to hand today. But I
think that's helpful, Simon, as you say. We're not altering policy, talking about as it is. So get John Massey to contact Lucy direct, and then we'll take it from there. Thank you very much for that. Any more comments on this particular one? If not, we'll move on to the next item, which is the housing revenue account, and it's Mazza, I think, going to speak to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm introducing this report. It's the HRA business plan, an annual refresh of the capital and revenue aspects of the HRA. This report seeks specifically recommendation approval of rents and service charge, management maintenance fee, and the delegation of the milestone house rent review. Essentially, the rent standard allows the HRA to increase rents up to 11.1%, which is CPI plus 1%. Due to the cost of living crisis, Department Levelling Up went through a consultation process, and the result of that was a cap of 7% on social housing rents. There was exclusion on supported housing. In terms of our HRA, the cap at 7% meant that from an 11.1% increase, we are losing 4.1%, which equates to circa 100 million in terms of the rent loss over the 30-year period, combined with the previous rent standard, which was a 1% reduction only for 4 years, a real term decrease of 13%. We again lost circa 290 million over the 30-year business plan period. Other impacts that we are aware of is the decarbonisation. We estimate circa 250 million in terms of an average cost per property of circa 20,000. Right to buy, we are losing on average about 175 properties a year. That equates to approximately 5,250 units. Our current reserve balance is at 47 million, but because of the factors I've just outlined, the current business plan shows a significant decline in that. In terms of this report, we have recommended or included a rent increase of 7% in 23-24, with the exclusion of milestone, as I mentioned, that's going through a rent review. We've included service charge increase of 10%, but that will be capped at £1 per week per service charge, with the exclusion of furniture packs which have been frozen, so no increase on those. We have included within the current business plan circa 2 million a year for net zero decarbonisation works, and also in the capital programme replacement of an average of 100 units, which in effect means that we're minimising the loss of the houses from 5,250 to about 2,250, still about 18% loss annual over that period. The reserve balance will reduce to about 6 million, which is within the minimum recommended reserve balance. But that also includes actually making savings of just under 1.1 million. But we've done that over 3 years, so 365,000 a year for the first 3 years. We did consult with customer voices on these issues, and bear in mind this was before the result of the consultation, rent consultation, and those attending recommended and were happy with a 7.5% increase. That's me, Chair. I invite questions.
Thanks very much for that. Yeah, in terms of the consultation, I think we understand there were 7 to 10 people were involved in that, weren't there? We've got 13,000 properties currently, haven't we, Nasa?
12,539 to be precise.
How many, because I know the question has been asked, how many did we have, was it 10 years ago?
Good question. I think it was, I'm not really sure, Chair.
I think, Chair, as Mazza was saying, we do sell on average about 175 a year.
Sorry?
We sell on average 175 homes a year. What's that, 1,700 odd homes higher than that 10 years ago, Chair.
But then we replace them also.
So are you suggesting that if I times that by 10, that's how many we've lost over 10 years? Is it going to be more than that or less than that?
That would be the amount we've lost, and then we will have
built... around that figure?
It will be around that figure, and then we will have built probably averaging about 30, 40 a year during that period.
Okay. So is there anything else that I want to raise at this stage? No, I'll leave that for now. Lucy.
Chair, I feel that there are 2 significant points here. One is the feedback, albeit from a small number of tenants, and bearing in mind that the majority of tenants, of our tenants, are receiving housing benefit or universal credit to pay for their rents. And the second thing is the table that we've got on page 7, showing the difference between council rent and market rent. And we are significantly, we're providing, Derby Homes is providing an excellent service. Certainly in my ward, I have far more complaints from people who are in social housing, from looked after by a housing association, than I do about Derby Homes. And I think personally that is a reflection on the quality of the service that Derby Homes is providing on a much lower rental income. And it's been squeezed, as the report explains, it's been squeezed tightly over the last few years. And there are going to be further squeezes over the coming years, looking at the graphs we've been presented with. I'm very happy to support what we've got in this paper.
Any more other comments at all from anybody? If not, thank you very much for that. Thank you, Mazza and Ian. And moving on to item 10, compliance with contract and financial procedure rules. Is that going to be yourself, Simon?
It is. Thank you, Chair. This is, again, the standard report to Cabinet. You have a list of these schemes at the top. So acceptance of funding for discharge for health and social care, addition of some refurbishment from the Lawn Tennis Association, and to include that in the capital programme, the addition of spin bikes at Springwood Leisure Centre and associated funding, and also squash court refurbishments at Springwood to turn into a multi-use studio. So most of those are form follows function in terms of accepting proposals to either increase income or to receive income. Then we have the acceptance of funding from the Ministry of Justice to the Youth Offending Service to expand best practice in early intervention and associated delegated authority to accept funding. So again, that's positive around how we tackle systemic issues in that area, and to embed the best practice. Indeed, we sometimes create best practice. Then there's a proposal here for just under 2 million to submit a bid for home upgrade grant, what I love the acronym HUG, and award the grant to individual homeowners if successful, and to add that to the capital programme. The details are in the report, Chair, and I'm happy to take questions on any of the information in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Lucy.
Right, 2 questions, please, Chair. The first one is clarification that in 4.1.2 it refers to a planned spending report regarding the Adult Social Care Discharge Fund. It doesn't say anything more about it in that section of the report, but there is reference later on in stakeholder engagement to drawing up a plan in line with the grant conditions. Is that the plan that is referred to in the 4.1 paragraph?
Simon?
I think Councillor Kerr has picked up a good point that this is meant to be joined up working. This is meant to be joined up approach to how we get people back into the community, create the appropriate discharge arrangements, but there's still a degree of monitoring that is required, probably beyond the benefit that we get from the funding, of being able to trace every discharge here and report on it. So what this is fundamentally saying, in order to get the second half of funding, you need to prove that you've been successful in utilising the first part of the funding. Given that the system declared a critical incident, I think it was on New Year's Eve, in terms of the health system, it does feel a bit disingenuous, if I can say it, to say, can you prove that you spent that money on the desired purpose, which is exactly what this money is for, to help the system manage discharges. but that is the requirement with petitions of a grant, and we will do that return and any necessary plans to secure the second amount of funding to help that system in Derby. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon.
And secondly, in return to this HUG funding, I just wondered how many properties we think we have in Derby that don't have access to the gas network.
Ian?
Yeah, I don't know that offhand, I'm afraid, Councillor Kerr, but I will get that information to you tomorrow.
Thanks, Ian.
Chair, regarding that if that seems to be a key requirement to be able to get any of this HUG funding, and it means that we should therefore be able, if we can identify those properties, and I'd expect them to be in groups, where a street for some reason hasn't ever had gas supplied to it, we should be able to therefore target those areas and identify people who would be eligible. Otherwise, I think it's going to be difficult to get this out to that few number of owner-occupiers who might be eligible.
Ian, Simon, your comments to Lucy's concerns?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We have been doing some work on a potential programme, so I'm not unduly worried that we won't be able to spend this money. We will find enough properties, or we have already found quite a number of properties. Interestingly, it does also include park homes as well, so we can look at addressing those sorts of properties as well for the first time.
So response from a confident Ian. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Alison.
Thank you. Simon, so I'm not familiar with the details of this adult social care discharge fund, clearly. Sometimes I am more familiar with things that are happening. I'm not familiar with this, so bear with these questions, if you will, please. So it is very welcome, as you say, given the terrible and dire state we have in the city at the moment, in the NHS and in social care. And I don't, as far as the 6th of September, this critical incident was still ongoing. I'm not aware that it's been revoked or whatever the correct term is, but I'm not aware of that. But anyway, so this fund is this money is absolutely essential, because we all know that one of the reasons we've got fleets of ambulances outside the hospital is because there's not enough easy ways of getting people out of the hospital. So, but I just wondered if we have any sense, is this, can you say, is it just, do we have, how is this working? Is it going to go to the Integrated Care Board? Who's going to be primarily responsible for getting this money spent in the most efficient way, do you know? And secondly, how does this relate to, if at all, to the government's promise of extra funding for social care generally?
Simon?
Thank you for those questions, Councillor Martin. So in paragraph 4.1, we talk about the funding that was announced. So this funding was announced by Theresa Coffey when she was the Secretary of State for Health in the Truss government. So it was a relatively short period of time, as we were aware. And this £500,000, it says in there that 200 million will be distributed to local authorities based on a formula, and 300 million will be distributed to integrated care boards. So this is meant to be that both sides of the system are trying to promote timely and active discharges, and the report details some of the type of solutions that we have. We know as a council we've had Perth House as an intermediary area. We've had discharge lounges at Royal Derby Hospital, everything else. So we're building on a bit of a track record of how we deal with this. So that's how the funding has come. The second bit of the funding is, I believe on Monday of this week, the government announced an additional 200 million to basically the system to manage discharges, and because that is what the government is perceiving is delaying people being discharged, ambulance waiting, and all the other press stories that we have. The allocation of how that 200 million is coming, which would be in addition to this 500 million, and who it comes to is unclear in the press release. I think regardless of where the funding is, we know there are acute pressures in being able to move people through the system, into the system, out of the system, back into the community. And the longer those systems maintain, the greater the health presenting problems will be. So hopefully we can solve through this funding some of the getting people out of hospital where they no longer need to be in hospital for medical needs. But is there enough capacity in the whole system and in care homes and in community domiciliary provision to meet all the need? No, because you can't magic a solution if it wasn't there in the first instance. Thank you.
Yeah, I believe there was something in the local press today about a new built facility that the local health service is involved in, which is going to help with discharges. So that might be worth reading that. Alison, you want to come back?
Okay, thank you. This is so important, Simon, so if you forgive this just extra point. There was a slight different element to my question, which was that this is obviously a discharge fund, which is important, accepted and agreed very much. But is there, are you aware of other funding allocated for social care that's not specifically for discharge? Have they announced that? Is that coming?
Simon?
I can give you information that they provided flexibility for next year, so discharge funding, and they delayed the fair funding, the adult social care reforms and allowed local authorities to keep money in the system to meet it. For this year, I'm not aware of separate funding that has been applied to 22-23, but there is additional funding that was in our budget report, which talks about a variety of pots that would help fund some of the demand pressures in social care. But I think we've got to be honest here, the demand pressures in social care is probably outstripping the additional money which is being given to meet that need. But the system is so under stress at the moment and pressure points. I think until we get out of this current context, we won't know what the ongoing pressures are of how these series of events have either increased demand in the system, managed it, allowed people to flow through the system. And sorry, the word system sounds horrible, but we recognise that social care and health is very much an integrated system of pathways for people.
And this problem's been there for at least a decade, and it's been getting worse, and they've never achieved what we all talk about wanting to achieve, and it seems to always be a bit of a mirage on the horizon. Any more comments or observations from members? If not, I'll thank you for that. I think that's the end of the meeting. This being a short meeting, because next week we've got 2 meetings, which I think will go on a little bit longer than half an hour each one. So batten down the hatches and get plenty of sleep. Thank you very much for your attendance.